Hi guys, Drew from Aloha Plant Life here, and today we're going to be continuing our series of videos focusing on the lighting in your home and understanding what plants can live in what lighting. And today we're going to be looking at southern facing windows. And just a quick reminder that I am in the northern hemisphere, so for those of you in the southern hemisphere, everything I'm saying is going to be the opposite for you. And I'm kind of excited today because I also have some new plants who are going to be making their debut in this video. But first I want to show you my living room that I'm sitting in now, which has southern facing windows, so you can get an idea of the light, so you kind of understand what I'm talking about as I'm going along through this video. So as you can see here, I have 3 floor-to-ceiling windows that take up this entire one wall. Tons and tons of bright light comes through this window. If I'm sitting on this couch trying to read, there are certain times of the day where I almost feel like I have to put sunglasses on in order to read it. So lots and lots of bright light, and not a lot of plants can tolerate that high a level of light or that much direct light. And by direct light, I mean the sun rays are directly hitting areas in this room, and if you have a plant in that area, it's directly hitting that plant. And I'm also going to share with you some other tips, tricks, and things you might not have thought about when it comes to southern windows as we go along. But let's go ahead and get into our first grouping of plants. We're going to get the obvious one out of the way first. Everybody has this on their list of plants for southern facing windows. It's the ones that will tolerate the most amount of light. So we're just going to get them done with up front here, and we're going to start with those cacti. Cacti do excellent in direct light, bright light. And I do want to take a moment to point out one thing, because nobody ever really mentions this. There are 2 very distinctive groups of cacti that are quite different from each other. So as you see here, these are arid environment cacti. They're your more drought tolerant cacti. And an easy way to spot a dry environment cacti is by looking for the defense mechanisms it has to prevent animals from sucking the water out of it, and that's all those spines and other prickly things. Now, as far as tropical cacti go, you don't really see that much of that type of thing going on them. And an example that I've shown you before of a tropical cacti is a Christmas cacti, or I believe this one's actually an Easter cacti. Ripsalis is another genus of cacti that is tropical in nature, and those cacti, the tropical cacti, do not want that direct light. They still want bright light, but they want bright indirect light because they're in a tropical jungle type environment and they're lower down on that jungle floor. So they're blocked by foliage up above and they're not getting that bright direct light. So just remember that when you're shopping for cacti for your southern facing windows, you want to make sure you're looking for arid environment, drought tolerant cacti, not tropical cacti. Now, the next big group that's always talked about are succulents. Succulents are very similar to cacti, except that typically they don't have all those spines and spikes either. But I do have 2 new succulents that I recently got that I'm super excited to show you today. I now have another Haworthia in my collection that I'm going to show you. It is a Haworthia retusa. And even though it is not a cacti, it is sometimes more commonly referred to as a star cactus. And I just think it is so cute. Let me see if I can get it up here nice and close for you to see these gorgeous leaves, these plump little wedged shaped leaves. And I don't know if you can see, but it kind of looks like they have stripes in the middle of them. And what that is those are actually little windows into the center of the plant, which is where the photosynthesis action takes place. And scientists aren't really totally certain why they have those windows. Part of the thought process is so that they can absorb even more light because they want so much light, but they're not 100% certain. But it makes it really cool because it gives it this kind of translucent look. But this plant loves bright light. And I do want to mention before I forget, always still be acclimating your plants to light, especially in your southern facing windows, because you don't want to accidentally burn that plant. So always start them further back, gradually move them closer. And depending on your situation, which I will discuss more of that a little later on, you may find that you can't get certain plants directly up in the window. You're going to have to find that sweet spot, and for some of them it may mean you need to set it a little bit further back, and for some of them maybe off to the side slightly. And I'll talk about some other tips and tricks, as I mentioned before, as we go along. But I absolutely adore this cute little new succulent I got. It's super cute. Happy to have another Haworthia in my collection. And then this next one I got, I do not even know what it is. I really don't. I spent like almost an hour before filming this video trying to figure out exactly what it was, but I'm pretty sure it is some type of sedum, and I will explain why. Let me get it up here for you. So I saw this plant at the plant store yesterday, and I was like, I can't not buy it. It's just so cute. And it looks very similar to my donkey's tail that I've shown you guys before, except that these vines are so much smaller. So my donkey tail vines are probably circumference wise like the width of like 2 fingers, right? This is like they're like maybe the width of like my pinky, but it looks similar in its growth pattern. So that's why I'm pretty sure it's some type of sedum, but I couldn't figure it out. And every time I did a picture and searched by picture, I kept thinking it was a donkey's tail. I'll figure it out eventually. For the meantime, look at this. Look at how cute this is with its itty bitty little leaves on these vines, growing, like I said, in that same pattern as that donkey's tail. And you see that mixture of color on there? This is another thing I want to mention that you might see a lot in your southern facing windows, and that is sun stress. So when plants are getting a lot of bright direct light, sometimes they will get sun stress. Now, sun stress is very different than plant burn or other negative reactions to direct light. Please keep that in mind. When a plant gets sun stressed, it just tends to develop a different kind of coloring to it. And some of the other plants I'm going to show you as we go along today will do that as well. And some plants, people actually purposefully sun stress to develop certain colorations in them. And it's not necessarily harmful to the plant. It's actually just a defense mechanism that plants have developed to deal with it. So as long as you're not seeing any other signs of damage from the sun, which we will get into what those signs are a little bit later, sun stressing is okay. It provides, like, for example, in this plant, this interesting pattern of kind of yellow, orangish, reddish coloring that's going on mixed in with this bluish, greenish coloring. But this plant, I'm sorry, this is just super cute. I can't even with this thing. And it was the only one they had left. And I was just like, you're coming home with me. You're coming home with me because I need more plants like you for southern facing windows. I'm gonna go ahead and set this back aside. So since we've been talking about hanging type succulents, let's move on to another hanging type plant that is also succulent-like, and that is string of plants. And I just recently released a string of plants care video for you that I will link at the end of this video and down in the description for you if you did not have a chance to check that out yet. But I did feature for the first time in that video my string of dolphins, which I have brought out again today. Let me get up close here for you so that hopefully you can see why this is called a string of dolphins. So if you can see here, these little leaves kind of look like they're shaped like a jumping dolphin. They've got kind of like a little fin in the middle of the back of that leaf, and it makes it look kind of like a leaping dolphin. And then I do feel like as they get older, those leaves start to flatten out like this. And now I feel like it looks like a little stingray, like the stem part of it is the tail of a stingray. So either way, it's all staying aquatic. Definitely will tolerate that brighter light. Definitely wants the brighter light on top of it. We're still in acclimation phase for this one. And the string of plants you need to be a little bit more careful with because they can potentially burn if they're getting too much direct light. So just keep an eye on them as you're acclimating them more and more towards your southern windows just to make sure that they're doing okay. So the next plant I want to talk about was actually featured in the previous lighting video, which was on plants for your north facing windows. And this is one of those plants that is just very versatile. So it is low light tolerant, will work in those north facing windows, but it also will work well in southern facing windows, and that is snake plants. So snake plants, you see them outside all over the place in more tropical areas. So for example, Florida or Hawaii, and they're in direct sun, you guys. They're in direct sun outside. So there's no reason they couldn't be in direct sun in your house. But once again, you just want to keep an eye out for any kind of scorching or burning on the leaves, anything like that, and kind of move it around a little bit if you need to. And tons of varieties of snake plants. I keep showing you the most common ones that you see, which are those tall ones with those flat leaves. There's other ones that have more cylindrical leaves that kind of look like fingers. And then you have bird nest varieties that are a little bit more compact and short, but still have kind of those broader leaves. Lots of different colors, lots of different varieties. So I'm sure there is some type that would work for the space in your home if you're interested in snake plants. So the next plant I want to talk about are Colocasias. Colocasias are very similar to Alocasias. However, I find that Colocasias tend to tolerate that bright light much better than an Alocasia. So I do own a Colocasia. I've shown it to you before. Here it is again. This is my taro plant. This particular variety is a black coral taro plant. And there are green varieties of these, there are variegated varieties of these, there's lots of different types of Colocasia. Oftentimes you'll see them labeled as their common name, which is a taro plant. It is also commonly called an elephant ear. So if you like that kind of vibe, this is something to consider for your southern facing windows for sure. So before we move on to our next grouping of plants, I want to talk a little bit about size of windows and how that affects direct light, especially when we're talking about our southern facing windows. So I've mentioned this before in my bedroom plant tour. So as you can see here, these windows are floor to ceiling and wall to wall, just like in my living room, but these windows are way, way taller. So the amount of direct light coming into the room goes further back into the room than it does in the living room. So that means that I've got less area in that bedroom that's not getting direct rays for a good part of the day than I do in my living room. And a good way for you guys to judge how much direct light is actually hitting a plant is to use your hand and give it a shadow test. So I would probably do this around noon. That is a good time of the day because once we pass noon and we move into the afternoon, you're getting typically into more harsh sunlight than you are for morning sunlight. So around noon, if you go and put your hand in front of a leaf on your plants, look and see how sharp the shadow is that is cast on that plant. If it's just a soft shadow and it's barely, making any difference, you probably have that plant in what would be now considered an indirect light situation. But if it's casting a super dark, harsh shadow with a very harsh line from where the shadow is versus not, that is a lot of direct light hitting that plant. So that's a simple little test you can do. Now, if you ever do find yourself struggling with plants in your southern facing windows and it's just such intense light and even the full sun plants seem to be giving you some problems, there are workarounds. So for example, you could hang up some sheer curtains, leave them open until about noon, and then pull those sheer curtains closed to help diffuse that light for the afternoon harsh rays so that they aren't directly hitting your plants. Another solution would be to do some sort of roller shade that just rolls up and stays up nice and tight, because I know we're not all like curtain people, right? Roller shades is another option, and they tuck up nice and tight to the top of the window so they're not really obvious, in your decor and whatnot, but when you need to, you can pull them down. Just make sure they're not blackout ones or any kind of specifically labeled sun blocking ones, because you don't want it to block too much of the light. Let's get back into some more plants here. So I do want to talk next about Ficus. So you guys have seen Ruby before. This is one of two of my Ficus elasticas, and either of them will work well in southern facing windows. They've been living in southern facing windows for the majority of their life, all but 1 month, I think. And they absolutely love it and are doing fine. This is another plant that you see outdoors a lot in tropical spaces, and it is just thriving in bright direct sunlight. So there's no reason you can't keep these in southern facing windows. But also, in addition to Ficus elastica are Ficus lyrata, otherwise known as your fiddle leaf fig. So fiddle leaf figs, and these are just some baby varieties here, but they will get quite big. They are trees just like Ficus elasticas. But fiddle leaf figs also will tolerate that bright light. Now, once again, just kind of gradually move them in. I have had people I know have more problems with fiddle leaf figs tolerating direct light than they have with the Ficus elasticas, but most of them have been able to get them acclimated eventually, but it just took a little bit longer than with the Ficus elasticas. So once again, just make sure you're always acclimating, especially in those southern windows. The next plant I want to talk about are banana plants. Musa is the scientific genus, and I do own a banana plant. It did get a while back, as I had mentioned in another video, hit pretty hard by some high windstorms we had, and the tallest stalks snapped off. So that's why it's kind of looking a little short right now, but you can see all of this new growth coming back in. This plant has actually pupped. These are all actually pups at this point. I really need to get out here and repot this thing and separate some of these out into other pots. But even though I have mine outdoors because that's the space that I wanted it in, you could have them indoors directly in your southern facing windows. And banana trees can get very large, yes, but just look for the dwarf varieties. That one I own is actually a dwarf variety. Those are not going to get as tall, but an excellent plant for your southern facing windows. Bird of paradise is another one that, I don't know, whenever I think of banana trees, I always think of bird of paradise, and whenever I think of bird of paradise, I always think of banana trees. I think it's because their leaves are similarly shaped. Yeah, I don't know, I guess that's just why I make that association. But as you can see here, very sculptural plant. Bird of paradise will get very tall. They do stay pretty vertical in their growth pattern, and they get these giant green leaves on them, and then they flower. And it should be labeled when you buy it what color it is. So it should say orange, meaning it'll get orange flowers, or white, or whatever it may be. I personally absolutely love the ones that get the white flowers, but the flowers actually look like little bird beaks and like with feathers behind the head, which is why it's called a bird of paradise. But that is another excellent one, especially if you have a room like my bedroom that has very tall ceilings and you need something a little bit taller to help fill the space. Now, the next one I want to talk about are crotons, and pretty much any variety of croton can survive and thrive in that bright light. Mine that I own is a Petra croton is the variety. and it lives outside, but it could live inside if I wanted it to. And as you can see here, they've got these very brightly different colored leaves here. There's some pretty deep veining pattern on the leaves. One of my friends actually refers to this as like a dinosaur plant. I don't know, makes her think of the dinosaur era, I guess, and I kind of get it. But anyway, very bright, colorful plant. If you're looking for something with bright, colorful foliage, this is a good one. I will give you a word of advice. Please make sure that you are washing your crotons off once a week. They are prone to spider mites, so definitely make sure you're giving them like a good spray down, or just wipe those leaves off with a wet cloth or something at least once a week just to help keep them at bay. But once again, another great sun-loving plant for your southern facing windows. Let's go ahead and move on to my chain of hearts, which you originally saw in my living room plant tour video shortly after I got it. It was pretty much a baby. It still is kind of a baby, but I just recently repotted it up into a 5-inch pot. And of course it's gonna get all tangled when I try to pick it up, because that's just what happens with chains of hearts. I don't know if you can see this new growth coming in right here at the bottom of this stem, but it is getting new little baby leaves going on there. But I absolutely love string of hearts with that heart-shaped leaf with that silvery kind of pattern on it. There is also a variegated variety of string of hearts out there, and this will start to fill in more. It just looks a little bit more sparse because I just took it up from a smaller pot into this bigger pot. But this plant has been living on the back of my couch in a southern facing window ever since it's been in my home, and it has been totally fine with it. But this is one of those plants that will get some of that sun stressing that I mentioned before. These are some younger leaves, and you can kind of see here how it's reddish on the back of that leaf right there. And you can also see how the leaves come in a little bit lighter when they're younger, and then they get that darker color I showed you before. But that red on the back of that is a little bit of sun stressing that's going on, but once again, nothing to worry about. It's not harming the plant. The plant is doing just fine. But another excellent trailing plant option, and I wish mine was not so juvenile and a little bit more full for you so that you could see how it looks when it's all filled in. And it will get to that point eventually, but it still has a little bit of ways to go. But chain of hearts, there's also a chain of spades that has a slightly more spade-shaped leaf to it, but grows in the same fashion. Scientific name is Ceropegia woodii, just in case you were wondering, but another good option for you. So the next plant I want to talk about are air plants, and there are lots of different varieties of air plants, and most of them are going to do great in those bright windows, such as your southern facing windows. And I do actually own air plants, but they're in my terrarium, and I don't know how well you're gonna be able to see them. And once again, as I mentioned in another video, I got hard water spots all up in this terrarium, so don't judge. It's on my to-do list to get in there and try to clean them out, but it's kind of a pain in the butt and I haven't had time to do it yet. So I'm gonna get up close so that hopefully you can see the plants through the opening here. Just don't judge the hard water spots. So hopefully you can see their cute little plants. And the nice thing about air plants too is that they're pretty low maintenance, you guys. I mean, there's no soil involved. And you've probably, if you know anything about air plants or you've seen any other videos involving air plants, people say you just need to soak them in water to water them once a week. You just set them in like a bowl of water for like 10 minutes or so, and then you're good to go. And you can put them in all kinds of different like vessels because they don't need soil. So you got all kinds of options for how to display them. So a very, very versatile option for your southern facing windows. Now, we couldn't talk about southern facing bright light windows without talking about palms. And I do own a palm. Once again, my palm is an outside palm, but I could have it in a bright southern facing window directly up in that window if I wanted to. As you can see here, this is my palm. This is actually a Pygmy date palm. They do stay relatively small for palms, so that would be potentially a good option for you. I have talked in other videos about all kinds of other palms. One of the most common and probably hardiest, long-lasting palms for indoor locations is the ponytail palm, which you're seeing here. And this ponytail palm is just kind of cute in general. I've mentioned it before. I just like how it looks like a lamp base to me. Like it's narrow and then it comes down to like this more bulbous base, and then it has that frond growth that just drapes over like hair. I think they're super cute. And the next type of plant I want to talk about is one I don't think I've ever talked about with you before, and I don't currently own one. I keep thinking about getting one. I don't know. There's so many to choose from, and they're so beautiful, and there's so many different color patterns and variations, and I just can't decide. I think that's why I've never actually gotten one. But right now is the time of year where you're really going to see a lot of options for them at your plant stores, your local nurseries especially, and that is Coleus. Coleus are excellent full sun plants for both indoors or outdoors. They are traditionally a more outdoor plant, but especially during the pandemic, that's when people started bringing them indoors more. And I've seen some amazingly beautiful ones that have grown super large indoors and done very, very well, but they will work well in your southern facing windows. And then next I want to talk about Hoyas, and I did grab my Hoya curtisii. This one in particular I find to be a more bright light tolerant Hoya. And if you look at this, I'm gonna get up close here for you. It's very kind of similar in its patterning, and it's like woodier stems with those round green leaves with kind of that splash silverish variegation on it. Very similar to that chain of hearts. So it is a woodier stemmed Hoya. And once again, this one will sun stress exactly like that chain of hearts. It will get red on the back sides of the leaves. And actually when I bought this one, it was sun stressed, which I thought was kind of odd because normally you don't see that when you buy them because they're under that shade cloth in the nursery. But where I've got it living is actually a little bit further back from my southern facing windows in my living room, and it's doing just fine there, but it has lost that sun stressing. So I know that it's definitely okay with the light where it is right now. But I know too that I could move it further closer to that window and it would still do fine. And there are other types of Hoyas that you can grow in southern facing windows as well. Some of them though are gonna wanna be a little bit further back or a little bit offset from that window, or else they're gonna have some issues. So think, for example, Hoya linearis is a little bit more tender leafed Hoya. So that one, you would really probably need to keep that a little bit further back or off to the side. But I even have my Hoya carnosa compacta closer to the window than this one, and it's doing just fine. So definitely Hoyas are an option. Just make sure you're especially paying attention as you're acclimating those Hoyas into the windows. And while we're on the topic of acclimation again, so when you're acclimating those plants more towards those southern facing windows into that brighter light, the things you're gonna wanna look out for are basically leaf burn, leaf scorch, that sort of thing. So what does that look like? Paler leaves. If the leaves are typically a very bright green and you see that they are starting to kind of become paler and more yellow, that's a good sign, especially if it's on all of the leaves. That is a good sign that that plant is not happy with that amount of light and you need to back it off. Now you may also start to see some actual burn, which will look brown. If you have variegated plants that have white on them, you will notice it on the white parts before you notice it anywhere else. So if you see a browning going on, especially if it's not just on the edge of the leaf, because sometimes browning on the edge of the leaf could be a sign of something else. But if you're seeing browning in the center of the leaf and it's not like getting mushy like you would see if there was like a rot situation going on, it literally kind of looks to me like if you were burning behind a piece of paper, a lighter or something, and the paper's just starting to turn brown from that lighter. That's kind of what it looks like on a plant, honestly. So if you see something like that, that's a sign that it's getting too much direct light and you need to either pull it back, move it off to the side, or use like a sheer curtain or something like that, like I said before. But those are the big things you want to look out for when you're moving those plants into that light that are negative signs and signs that it's just not happy. And maybe it means it's just not happy yet and you can still gradually move it closer and closer. Maybe you've just been doing it too fast. But for some plants, it's a sign that no, I'm never really gonna wanna live that close to your specific southern facing windows. And before we move on to our last grouping of plants, also remember what I told you in the north facing windows video, that what's outside your window has an impact as well. So if you have a big tree outside of your southern facing windows and it's casting shade onto your southern facing window, then you're not getting as much direct bright light as I am in the living room here where there is nothing outside of the window. And awnings. Awnings are a big one. Or even if you don't have an awning, if you have like an overhang of your roof coming over your house because maybe you have a covered back patio, that's diffusing the light. And now it's no longer like a direct light situation. So all of these variables really have to be taken into consideration. And that's why it's really hard for me to say, you know, like, yes, this will work for everybody in every single situation in a southern facing window. It's just not how it works. So use your best judgment and use what I'm telling you here today to figure out the ones that will work. But these plants are all a good starting place to try. That's really what we're getting at here. So our next and last grouping of plants, we are going to start with my hibiscus, which I have never shown you my hibiscus in full. We have looked at my hibiscus propagations, but never my full hibiscus. This is a variegated hibiscus. Its common name is called salsa dancer hibiscus, but it is an absolutely gorgeous plant. Sometimes its leaves are pink variegated, sometimes it's white variegated, sometimes it's a combination of the two. It is just a very, very fascinating plant, but it is a tropical form of hibiscus, not to be confused with a hardy hibiscus. That's a different type of hibiscus. But now that I think about it, also great for bright, bright, sunny location. But typically the tropical variety is what you'll see people do more indoors. And once again, this is going to be a bigger plant. Technically it's a bush, and it can be trained to be grown upwards and the stems braided to be all looking super, super fancy and topiary-like. So you have those options out there, and then you have just the regular bush options like I showed you mine is, but they will all work very, very well in very bright, bright, sunny locations, and especially the variegated varieties. The closer you get them to those windows, the brighter the light, the more of that variegation you're gonna get. And then of course, hibiscus will get beautiful flowers, these huge blooms. And I will tell you right now, don't be surprised if you have them indoors if they don't bloom. Sometimes they're a little bit less prone to bloom if they're indoors, but if you're getting that lighting exactly right and all their other care requirements exactly right, you can get them to bloom indoors. But that's another good option, especially if you're looking for a bigger plant for a bigger space. Cordylines. Cordylines are another good, tall, very tropical looking plant option, but they want lots and lots of bright, bright light like you get in your southern facing windows. I do actually own a variety of cordyline, but once again, it is outside, out back. And as you can see here, very, very pink. This is called a Hawaiian Ti plant. And this specific variety, you know what, you guys, I am totally blanking on the variety right now. I think it's a red sister or something like that. But whatever. It is a type of Hawaiian Ti plant. There are lots of different varieties and colorations for tea plants. And that is tea spelled T-I, by the way. I hear a lot of people refer to them as Hawaiian Ti plants. I hear a lot of people refer to them as Hawaiian Ti plants, but I've been to Hawaii a lot and I've heard the Hawaiian people talk about them, and they are called tea plants. But the scientific name is cordyline. And like I said, lots of different varieties for you to choose from. So definitely look into those if you're looking for a more tall and narrow-ish type plant for a bright, bright southern window location. And now I want to talk about another trailing plant. And I brought out my propagation, let me grab it, of my Dichondra Silver Falls because she's just so big. I can't manage her and have her all in screen for you to see. But this is a nice trailing plant with the beautiful, beautiful silverish green vines here and these little leaves, and a very fuzzy, soft plant. Like, I just like to touch this plant a lot because it's super soft and it smells fabulous. It's one of those plants that the leaves just put out this nice odor, similar to like what you would think like a eucalyptus puts out a smell from its leaves. So does this plant, just a different smell than eucalyptus, but still very nice. And it trails and will get very full and very, like I've said before, jungly vibe, but absolutely loves full sun. You see these actually used in a lot of places to replace grass on the ground. So if you can use this to turn your lawn into a lawn of just this, then it's going to have to be able to survive pretty much any level of light. So that is another excellent option, especially if you're looking for something that's going to hang or trail. And I've got one more plant to show you, but before that, my last little tip that I think a lot of people don't realize when they're thinking about their windows and how much light is coming through them is the fact that not all windows are created equally. I'm in the process of replacing all of the original builder installed windows in my home with new windows. And these new windows are loads better from a ton of different standpoints than the original ones. But the big one is that they're more energy efficient. And the reason they're more energy efficient is because they're not letting as much of the outside temperature in, for starters. So the windows that I have now in my living room and bedroom are letting in way less heat than the original windows that were there, which is something else you need to take into consideration when you're putting plants directly into southern facing windows, is the heat level that's coming off of those windows, because a lot of plants, they might be fine with the sun, but they might not be okay with the temperature in that space. But these new windows are blocking more of that temperature, and in the winter, they're blocking more of the cold. But part of the reason they're able to do that is not only because they're better sealed around the edges, which also helps prevent pests from creeping in, mind you, but they also have a coating on them that is designed to block more of the UV rays coming through, especially the ones that can damage your furniture, like causing, your woods or your fabrics on your furniture to fade. And because those are being blocked, now there's not as harsh of light rays coming through these new windows as there were in my builder grade windows that were originally there. So I think that's why I have had better luck with some of my plants in my southern facing windows that other people would be like, there's no way that plant can survive in a southern facing window. You're gonna fry it. So for example, The last plant I want to show you is my Begonia maculata, but as you know, she's so big, wild, and crazy. I just brought one of her propagations down here to show you. So you've been seeing this a lot lately, but you know, beautiful polka dotted leaves with that bright, bright red backing. And these are fairly thin, sensitive leaves. And so a lot of people will tell you, no, you can't put this in a southern facing window because it's just going to completely crisp up, fry, and die. She's been living on the back of my couch in my living room directly in the southern facing window for almost a year now, and she has not burned, she has not fried. You've seen in recent videos just how much crazy new growth she keeps putting out. She has not stopped growing all winter long. She is doing just fine in my southern facing windows. So once again, it's very specific to your situation as to what plants will work and what won't, and whether plants that everybody will tell you are not full sun plants will work or they won't. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I hope you have learned a lot of new stuff today and you have a better understanding now of your southern facing windows and some plants that you could potentially try out in your various southern facing rooms. If there's any plants I didn't talk about today that you're currently growing in southern facing windows that are working for you, comment down below and let us know. And if you've not yet hit that like and or subscribe button, please do so. We are getting so close, you guys, to 500 subscribers. And once we have 500 subscribers, I am allowed to have a community tab on my YouTube channel where we can talk more and have a bit more of a conversational feed going on amongst you guys and me and each other, talking more and more about plants. So please, 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 if you have been watching these videos and have not hit that subscribe button yet, please do so. And I look forward to seeing you guys again next time. Aloha!